Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. If you're on Android, check out Spotify or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. If you're Apple Podcast works just fine. Also check out Off the Floor. That's our new Discord server. Man, that thing was live after the Pat Riley press conference. You don't want to miss it. Why wait for tweets to come in? You don't need to do that. Then you got to go through. I mean, yeah, they talk a little Drake and Kendrick on here too, but it's not all that all day long. You can actually talk Heat. So check it out, $2.99 per month. Link is right here in the description on the podcast feed and the YouTube channel, and usually pinned to the top of the 5 Reasons Twitter page. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, including big Miami Heat fans. They're suffering just like you are. BigBrotherIronwork.com. That's BigBrotherIronwork.com. They specialize in all metal work, such as aluminum fences, gates, pergolas, railings, and more. They have more than 20 years of experience. Established experts in the field, licensed and insured. Here's the thing. Not only do they have pricing that's competitive, but they offer free estimates across Florida, including Dade County, Broward, the Keys, and more. They guarantee steadfast fabrication and installation. Check them out at BigBrotherIronwork.com. Reach out to Abraham at 786-406-5780. That's Abraham at 786-406-5780. BigBrotherIronwork.com. And now, today's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yikes. 5 on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing rubber frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the flow playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. We're going to right a great wrong. We didn't have Greg Sylvander on the Pat Riley episode. Alex and Brady and I were down at the arena, and I was like, I'm getting out of here before 4 o'clock. So we sat down, we banged out that podcast, and I thought we covered a lot in there. More stuff was able to be reported and investigated afterwards, and I'll touch on some of that here today, but I welcome you all to listen to it. I thought both Brady and Alex had good perspectives on it. And again, they were in the room. Both of them got to ask questions. I got to ask a couple. And again, we appreciate the Heat for spreading the questions out. I can tell you that the team that plays the Miami Gardens, like, we wouldn't get anything in. So I don't take it for granted that the Heat have treated us like a mainstream outlet from the pretty much the very start. And I don't take for granted that we get 3 credentials to every game, because not every outlet gets that. So thank you to the Miami Heat for that. Doesn't mean we're not going to criticize them. But they know that, and I appreciate the professionalism and the trust in that regard. Okay, so let's get to it, Greg. I'll let you go here at the very beginning before we get to the theme of the episode, which is basically going to be an extension of the extension conversation that we had on the podcast yesterday, which is, how does this thing actually play out? Because yesterday we kind of reacted to Riley's comments and why he would say those things and all the rest. And I have a little bit more detail on that, but we're going to project it forward now. Like, what can Heat fans expect? And I did cover some of this on the Five Guys episode with Alex Dono today, which probably won't go on the podcast feed this time because we have this, but you can check it out on the YouTube channel. So I'll give you 60 seconds here. Your overall thoughts on the presser itself.
It was refreshing. It was Pat Riley, as I was used to him, kind of pulling no punches. I like that. I thought that was a fun part of the programming. I don't know how smart everything was, but that's okay. That's part of the mix of emotions that you get from a Pat Riley presser. But honestly, the fact that availability was what he kept harping back on and he kept pointing back to me, that's what I wanted to hear. That's exactly where we've been treading water this entire time. On this show in particular, we continue to talk about that availability. So for him to be on the forefront of that and continue to cycle back to it, he wouldn't let anyone in the room away from the availability conversation, to me, shows that their hearts and minds are in the right place. Now, there was some crazy stuff that went down, keep your mouth shut comment. I was a little surprised by that, frankly, just because I feel like that could rub, Jimmy the wrong way, although probably I'm more sensitive than Jimmy ever will be. So but we'll get through that. You know what I mean? Like this isn't the first time Pat's called out players, and I'm sure he does it privately a lot louder than he did publicly in that presser just the other day.
Well, the availability thing, which we talked about a lot yesterday, it kind of puts him on the spot a little bit too, because now Heat fans are going to be paying even more attention to that. Like if we have a situation where there's close to 35 starting lineups again next year, be like, wait, I thought Pat wanted to address this, and it wasn't addressed. So he put himself a little on the spot, and also by saying that we had the conversation with Jimmy's agent last year about availability. Now, I want to, before we get into kind of where this goes and the four options, which our guy Sean Rochester, if you didn't know that, he actually runs the 5 on the Floor Twitter account. I don't know if I'm outing him here. It's not me. In fact, I don't even have the password to the account. Okay, like I just let him run. I run 5 Reasons Sports. I don't run that one. 5 OTF _. So we'll get to the poll that Sean put up today, and I did retweet it on 5 Reasons Sports about the possible outcomes of this, and I have definite thoughts about where this might go. But just a couple of things I want to just give on background here, because I did have a chance to investigate some things after the fact. First, I don't necessarily think Pat meant to come out that strong against Jimmy. I don't. I think it kind of turned out that way, but whereas he knew he was going to get asked the question about the extension. That was obvious. But I don't think that it was so agenda driven in the way that maybe we thought at the time. Okay. I mean, he was definitely going to address it, but it ended up becoming essentially, with the exception of calling Hero fragile and then backtracking from it, it essentially became a Jimmy Butler / availability press conference. And I don't necessarily think that was the entire intention. Some of this is directed by the way that we go as reporters. I asked him one Jimmy question. I asked him one Tyler question. Others, split their questions up in various ways. So that's the first thing that I wanted to get to there. I don't know necessarily that he was intending to take the flamethrower out. Okay. And I think that matters. Okay. Because it speaks to how they proceed. I also thought it was very interesting that he referenced, I didn't mention this yesterday, where they stand on the salary scale. And it just shows that Pat is on Twitter, or somebody is presenting Twitter to him.
Oh yeah.
I saw that same tweet the day before. You saw it too, right? Like it was the top 8. I forgot who put it. I don't know if it was Hoop Central or Dunk Central or one of the centrals. Somebody put it out, or maybe it was Clutch Points. I'm not sure, but it was one of them put out this tweet about the teams with the top salaries and how only 2 of the top 8 were still alive in this round. Okay, which is, I guess, Boston and Denver, which were the prohibitive favorites to play in the finals. So it looks like Denver's in some trouble here. So. And the fact that Pat referenced that means either he saw it or someone brought it to his attention. And again, I think that is sort of him doing a service to ownership in that sense, to make that point. We've made that point that they are top 10 and they were 7th in salary this year and all the rest of this, and they are going to be paying luxury tax. Okay.
Above the Lakers.
Right. And right, exactly. Above the Lakers. Okay. So, but I do think that was done to kind of take some heat, so to speak, off ownership. You don't bring that to the table unless that's intentional. Okay, so that's a couple of things we hadn't gotten into yesterday. But also the big thing, Greg, is I had a chance to kind of talk to various parties. I know obviously there are tweets or quotes that go on the record, and then there's other stuff that you kind of learn from various people on background. And I try not to just talk to one person or one side in this situation. I've gotten in trouble doing that before. I go back to 2016, where I was pretty much reflecting Dwayne's side on everything, because I wasn't talking. The organization wasn't really giving me anything to work with. So I was essentially talking with Dwayne daily. And so I got his perspective on the entire situation. Obviously, this time I would like it to be more balanced if possible. And so in talking to parties that could be involved, also parties that just might have an interest in this, I've come to some conclusions about how this might play out. Okay.
Do tell.
It's not reporting, so don't aggregate it, people. Okay. It's reporting in the sense of trying to get a handle on a situation, be as nuanced as possible, and try to make an educated guess. But it's still a guess, because anything can happen between now and then. All right. So that plays into this. Okay. Our guy Sean on the 5 on the Floor account put, what do you believe is the most likely outcome with Jimmy and the Heat? 1, traded this summer. 2, no extension, opts out of player option, and leaves after 2025. 3, no extension now, but still in Miami after 2025 on the player option or an opt out and extend later. Or 4, an extension this summer. The one option he did not put on there, and I'm glad he didn't because this is not a reasonable possibility, is anything short of a 2-year option. I don't even know why that's been talked about because that would essentially just be a year replacing the player option. We're not even getting to that. And the other thing I am glad he didn't put in here, but I'll elaborate more on this, is takes less money than the max to stay because that ain't happening.
Nope.
Okay. So let's get to it here. Okay. Oh, and one more thing before we get to that. No, you know what? I'll save it for the second part of the episode. Remind me on this because I want to get into the perception of Jimmy's dissatisfaction with the roster, which I know is something that's talked about a lot, and his input in the roster versus reality. Okay. Because this is a big fan sticking point, and I think they've got it a little bit wrong here. But we'll get to it as we go forward. Okay. So here are again the options. Traded this summer, no extension, leaves after the year. In other words, opts out and goes. No extension and returns, or extended this summer. What do you think is winning?
I'm gonna guess because everybody wants everything to happen right now. Extend this summer is leading.
It is, but it's tied.
Really?
That was the number 4 option. I will tell you that extended this summer is one of my 2 options that I would consider. Okay. It is tied with an option that I don't think has any chance of happening.
Really?
At 40% extended this summer. Also at 40%, no extension. Okay. This was option number 3. No extension, but still in Miami beyond 2025.
That's the cake and eat it too option.
I don't think that's happening. I just don't. I'll elaborate, but I just don't think that's happening. People have those 2 at 40%. Then at 10% each, okay, nice round numbers here, even though there's more than 1,200 votes on this poll. Traded this summer, which I think is also not happening.
Agree.
Or no extension and leaves after next season, which I actually think is one of the 2 most likely options. And that one is at 10%. So I think the fans got it half right. To me, the 2 options that are most likely, and I think by a long shot, okay, are either the Heat just decide to extend him this summer, give him what he wants, and I can tell you right now, it's not about the roster. He wants his money. Okay? He wants his money. He wants his money for raising the team out of the dirt. And we can have those conversations. They were in the dirt, by the way. They were in the Whiteside era. We can have the conversations about whether or not you pay for past performance. Okay? Reasonable conversations, which we've had on the podcast. But I can tell you, he wants to be paid the max that they can pay him because he feels he's earned it. And he, I guess, believes he will earn it. Now, the other part of this, Greg, that I want to throw in before we get to this and it doesn't have anything to do with the roster. It has nothing to do with the roster. Okay? It has to do with he wants to get paid. That's it. Like, this is a simple conversation. If you pay the man, all right, you keep the man. That's it. Okay? That's where we're at right now. This is not about, I do not believe that this is going to end up in a situation where it's, well, if he takes a little less. No. And it's not just him. Guys don't take less. Like, stars do not take less. Like, people,
no, that's over.
Like, that's over. Like, this is the player empowerment era. The union doesn't approve of it when you take less. And what Dirk did for Dallas to stay, what Duncan did for the Spurs because they were in comfortable situations and they were the franchise icons, and what Dwayne did for a little while until he didn't, that kind of stuff just doesn't happen. Okay, so this is about, you're either giving him the 2 years, what is it, 111 million, it's really 58 million, and then it's an extra 3 on top of the player option, or roughly 3. You're either doing that or you're not. Like, this is not like, I don't think this is a haggle. Okay, and it's not a haggle over the roster either. And my understanding is that Jimmy's input on the roster has basically been limited, and I guess I'll get to it now, limited to a couple of things. He wanted them to sign Kyle Lowry. We have said that repeatedly. The organization did it. They gave him the third year reluctantly. It didn't work out. I think even people close to Jimmy realize and acknowledge that it didn't work out, okay, that it turned out to be a mistake. And he wanted PJ Tucker re-signed. And they didn't do that. And we've discussed that on the podcast as well, why they didn't do that. They have legitimate reasons for doing that. It's the same summer as Caleb. They, again, both guys wanted to max out what they could max out at that time. They didn't re-sign PJ. That's my understanding. Those have been his desires, okay? I don't think the rest of it is about the roster. But getting back to this, okay, do you think that this option that I think is not a possibility, which is no extension, but then he returns, okay, in other words, he opts into the player option afterwards and stays after not getting an extension, do you think there's any chance of that?
No, I don't. Not the no extension part of it. But I would think that he could wait on an extension. I don't think an extension has to happen this summer. And if I were the Heat, that's how I would approach this. I would call the bluff of the timing of this. Timing is everything. And you know who's also up for an extension? The guy who came as a finalist as a defensive player of the year and was announced Rudy Gobert was the winner, Bam Adebayo. He's extension eligible as well.
Right.
Maybe you give him an extension, but I don't think you need to rush this Jimmy situation. I don't know what the market looks like for Jimmy. So to me, I'm calling that bluff a little bit. It's the only leverage you have in getting him to be more available. And it appears as if that's really the crux of the issue here. So to me, if I were the Heat, I would try to make option number 3, the one that you do not think is a possibility. I would try to push that envelope a bit. I really would. And I know that that's risky, and Heat fans probably are gasping, thinking of the Dwayne scenario. For one, this isn't Dwayne. And 2, I just, I think you still can get something worked out. I don't think you're going to, and maybe I'll be wrong about this. I don't think you're going to burn bridges that can't be repaired. And so I personally think that they will ultimately have the best offer on the table, and it'll be a max offer, but it just may not be immediately upon this summer. And I don't think that that's a precursor to him leaving necessarily, because I think you should see what the market bears before you just shell that out and make sure he's available.
Completely rational perspective. I'm glad we disagree for a change. I think they're absolutely playing with fire there, and they're going to get burnt. Because like you said, this is a different situation, and Jimmy is a different human being. We can have a reasonable argument still about whether or not you should give him the 2 years right now, which is basically for past performance, okay, and a hope of what he's going to provide. We can also say that, and I've said this, that they should try to hold the feet to the fire on more availability. Or my thing is not even more availability. It's just play harder at the games he played. Like that's kind of, that was more it was the coasting during games this year that bothered me more than that. My understanding, there were at least 15 games this year out of the 22, maybe more, that like were legitimate, right? Like there were personal issues that the Heat has generally been very generous about that with their players. Okay. Which again, I respect that they do that. And then there were injury related, and then maybe there were a handful of games that Jimmy really didn't feel like playing. Okay. But my issue was that like you had these games he played in that it was like he was conserving himself, and then he'd sit after that. And you're kind of like, okay, wait, what were you conserving yourself for? Like you're playing Milwaukee, you're playing Boston tonight, go. Okay, that's more my thing. But again, as I'm going to talk about this in terms of the money, where I don't really think there's a haggle here. It's either all or nothing. I don't really know how you enforce the games played thing. Like I love it in concept. I really do. And I love that Pat devoted a lot of time to this in his press conference, because I think he spoke for the fans, honestly, and probably for, others in the front office and ownership who are frustrated with the lack of availability of a lot of these players. No matter how many times Spo, to his credit, says we have enough. It was annoying for them not to have enough night after night after night. 2 guys in, 1 guy out, 2 guys in, 1 guy out at 35 starting lineups. I greatly appreciate that he went there. I just don't know how you enforce it. Feels to me like you're trying to turn back time. Like things he talked about in there about availability and the outside forces. We've talked about those on the podcast. Like the game has changed now. It is the LeBron player empowerment era. I mean, Pat talked about bringing in your own, having your own trainers. They literally hired LeBron's trainer. The second year that LeBron was here, right? Like, I mean, nobody had any disrespect for Mike Mancini. He's a terrific person, terrific trainer. But I'm saying, like, the game done changed, right? Like they all have their own trainers, right? They're all, and we've talked about, like, even during the Big Three era, not just LeBron, but Tim Grover, who had worked with, I knew Tim fairly well. Like, Tim had worked obviously with Kobe and Jordan. People don't know this necessarily, but Kobe and Dwayne used to like fight over his time at certain points. There was like an issue one summer when who would have Tim's services. But then Tim was kind of going one direction when Dwayne couldn't get on the court with a bone bruise, and it didn't end up working out all that well. And later, Dwayne wasn't working with Tim. And when Dwayne came back, he wasn't working with, he was working, I believe, with David Alexander and with others. This is just the way this goes now. The agents are involved, the trainers are involved, and I don't know how he's going to like mandate. And I have to check this, and this is my fault for not having the time to do this. I don't even know what clauses he can put in a contract these days.
No, there'd have to be some sort of incentive for games played, and Jimmy Butler's not going to accept that.
Right.
The one thing I thought was
the 3-1. I want to let you continue on that. But remember, Greg, the 3-1 assist to turnover thing with Tim Hardaway.
Oh, yeah.
That clause with Hardaway and how much that pissed him off. Like,
yes.
Okay.
Jimmy Butler is not doing that. And when Pat also during the presser, he was big about I lost my train of thought. Let's just continue on.
Sorry, that's my bad. I should.
It's all good. All good.
All right. Well, we'll pivot back to it. But what the one thing I want, and I'll lead you in on this. Okay. I just don't think it's viable based on my understanding of the situation. Now, you want to go to it? Go to it. What you still got on your mind? Go ahead.
I thought that it was interesting that he brought up the 65 games played, and he's basically saying that all these players are using that as the measure now. Now it's not an 82 game season. It's a 65 game season. And I don't know how you go back from that. That was what I was trying to get out and couldn't, sorry.
No. And you're right. No, we talked about it a little yesterday, but it's kind of like when I go to dinner with my daughter now. Right. And, I've set a certain standard on how much of her plate she should eat if I'm going to continue ordering for her off the non-children's menu. And now it's just basically become, well, if I eat half of the steak, okay, and I'm like, we could have just gotten you a burger, Sasha. Like, we keep moving the goalposts here, right? Like, it's ultimately you have to set a standard that's higher, or else, the players, the kids in this scenario are going to take advantage. That's just the way that it is, and so I agree with him on that. I just don't know how you mandate it. Like, Jimmy doesn't care about awards. Like, that's the last. This is the last guy that you're gonna motivate with all NBA stuff or defensive or all defense or any of that kind of stuff. Like, it's so. Again, I appreciate the thought. I appreciate trying to maintain additional leverage here going forward in some of these areas. You want him to play more. You want him to play harder. You want, you want to have more control of the situation. Maybe there's some other thing. I mean, you want him not to run his mouth, about Boston and New York when, he's not available to play in that series. You didn't want emo Jimmy, because I know that Pat was not thrilled with all that stuff. Like, you can set certain standards here, but ultimately the modern NBA comes down to, this is what you can pay a guy. This is the max. This guy is a max player or he's not. And if he's not a max player to us, he might be to somebody else. It only takes one that has the right circumstances that can take him in. And so my feeling is, okay, that the possibility of no extension and returns, which actually right now is leading, I don't think that happens. I think it's either you give him the 2 years now, wow, or you get one really good year out of him. He'll be motivated, and then he's opting out. You're not seeing him again. That's what I think. And so then I pose this question to Dono. I'm going to let you answer it after the break. Okay. Would you be okay with that? If the option is that you get one great year out of him, you don't extend him, You get one great year out of him, Greg, and then he opts out and he goes somewhere else. Are you all right with that? All right. Before we get to that, I want to mention a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. You'll be okay with them. It's c-armandstaffing.com. Check them out at c-armandstaffing.com. If you are a hospital, if you're a doctor's office, you got to reach out to Nelson and his team. He'll bring all the C-arm equipment to you directly. They've got all the cutting edge imaging technology. They're also huge Miami Heat fans, really good people. His entire family, they've come to our watch parties, just good people, and they know what they're doing. 561-891-9620. That's 561-891-9620. They bring the X-ray equipment and the staffing to you. Again, it's mobile C-arm staffing services or c-armandstaffing.com. You can fill out the form right there on the website. Make sure that you mention 5 reasons. All right, so are you okay with that? Jimmy balls out. Balls out. He plays 72 games, takes him to the Eastern Conference Finals, and then he says, "Here, I'm opting out of my player op. I'll see you later."
Guess what? Contrary to what probably most people would think, I'll take it. Let's ride with it and see what the hell happens. Because what do you like? To me, that is such a far-fetched scenario. Like, he's never played, and I know you're just using that arbitrary number as an example, 72 games or 71 games, whatever it was.
Right.
And to play at an MVP level, I just feel like what are we really talking about there? Is that something that he's going to push for and then just walk out the door when Miami can offer more than anybody else? To me, it feels like that's a tough spot for Jimmy. There's a risk there for Jimmy as well, I guess, is where I'm going. It's not just risk for the Heat. I think that Jimmy Butler does. He risks a little bit of just getting some security long-term, because I think ultimately in Miami, it'll happen. It's just pressing the financial stuff until they get their books balanced. I just think timing is everything with that. And the extension just right at this moment is not necessary.
Okay. So the question would become, if he opts out, right? Would there be a salary slot for him out there somewhere, right, to take him in at age 35 for a team that would then extend and prolong his career, right? So you're right in the sense that part of his lack of leverage at that point would be, again, how many teams are in position to actually take him in and are in position to win right away where they would want him at that price. But with the risk of it, and I know you say you're okay with the risk, and Dono was okay with the risk of it too. I think it's something that Heat fans would freak out about if it actually happened. Like let's say that he has this great season. Like, he's motivated to have he has an FU season, and part of it is at the Heat itself, right? Because here's the one thing I don't think is going to happen. And by the way, this was not on the chart. I don't think he's going to sit out of camp no matter what. Like, this is not going to be like Minnesota. It's not. There's too much respect here between the parties, I think, for that to happen. Jimmy's at a different stage of his career, and it doesn't benefit him. It benefits him more to come in, okay? There he was trying to get out of there, all right? It benefits him more to come in, kick ass, which, by the way, benefits the Heat for that period of time, and then if he wants to have the FU season at the haters, at the Heat, at us, at whoever, right? And then he makes a decision. Okay, the ultimate FU is okay, and now I'm dipping. Okay,
that's like Kendrick Lamar level maniacal stuff happening there. He would wait a whole year for the revenge on the Heat.
I don't think he's gonna dog it. To me, the concern that people would have about, because I hear that concern about not giving an extension. They're like, he's going to come in and dog it. I mean, that was a concern about Tyler too. Like, about, right? People had that concern about all the trade rumors. He was going to come in. Tyler didn't dog it. He just got hurt again. Okay. And then he got swamped in the playoffs and he couldn't handle it. All right. But like, he didn't dog it. So to me, Jimmy's not, I think Jimmy gets on the court. Again, I wish more of that competitive fire had come out in some of the regular season games this year, instead of feeling like he was preserving himself. And there is legitimate statistical decline that we've talked about. Like, the rim numbers scream that. The numbers against top 10 defenses in the league suggest that. So again, this is not a complete, like, okay, Jimmy is the same player that he was 2 years ago. I don't know that he is. Okay. And again, until he's going full tilt, and maybe we would have seen it in the playoffs, he doesn't get hurt against Philadelphia. But then again, he doesn't get hurt against Philadelphia if they don't have to play that game. And they don't have to play that game if more guys are available, including him during the regular season. So again, that seems to be Pat's point. But I don't think you see him dog it. I think that if you're making the bet, Greg, that you're not going to extend him, you're not going to trade him. By the way, that's on the list here, and I don't think that's happening either. Okay, so that's the last place now. I don't think they're not trading him this summer. I don't see that. If you're not going to extend him, you're not going to trade him, and you're basically banking on getting a great year out of him, okay, and then you try to sign him afterwards. There is, I think, some value to that for the Heat. But I also, knowing what I know about Jimmy, I don't think he'll sign an extension after the 1 year. I don't.
When you put it that way, it sounds like it's hard. Like it wouldn't be something it sounds like it's a Heat homer perspective, Heat hopeful perspective versus a real perspective that's fair and honest between the two parties, right?
Yes. I mean, Greg, if they get Donovan, let's say they got Donovan Mitchell, right? A lot of Heat fans will react and say, oh, now Jimmy's going to want to stay. Not if they don't pay him. Like this is about money. This is about money. Like we can make it about a whole bunch of other things. This isn't about which teammates he wants to play with. It's not about Spo. He's not trying to leave Spo. It's not about that. It's not about Pat specifically. It's not about getting his feelings hurt in a press conference. It's not about that. It's ultimately going to come down to money. That's what these things usually come down to. That is the show of respect in the NBA. That is what Dwayne took as disrespect at the end. And if you don't think that Jimmy and Dwayne are going to have some conversations about some of the stuff, Dwayne did have some interesting likes on social media over the past couple of days, which seemed to suggest that he agrees with the availability point, which is kind of interesting coming from Dwayne. But I just think that, to me, in order, most likely scenarios here, okay, as we go forward, most likely, I think they extend him this summer. I think that's most likely. I think right there is they don't extend him and he opts out and walks after 1 year. I think the other two options are way down. I think the option of no extension and he comes back, and I think the least likely option is he's traded this summer. And then I think if you want to go even further down from that, even though this wasn't on the poll, it's that they agree to some middle ground. That's not happening. That's where I'm at with it.
That's bold. I'm surprised that you're going with basically a nuclear option there. And also I think his extension happening immediately this summer, I feel like that's earlier than expected. So you're really, these are two things that are going to make somebody take an action and have to make decisions sooner than they may be expected to in the organization's from the organization's perspective.
Well, they gave Bam the extension early, Greg, right? I mean, they did.
And they've paid Jimmy too. Like, I guess I'll ask this. Haven't they paid Jimmy for everything he's done?
But this is not a league of, well, you know how this goes. It's never it's never just about that. It's always it's the balloon going away present. And that's just the way that this league works. And look, philosophically, I have an issue with it. Okay, I do. Just like philosophically, I have an issue with guys not playing 75 games. I'm with Pat. Just like philosophically, I think that they should probably working with the team trainers more so that they're aligned on things, okay, instead of always going to outside, okay? Although some would argue that a lot of these guys, obviously Jimmy works with Brickley and everybody has a guy or two guys, and that there's, that they have their own masseuses, they have their own lot of things, okay? I'm aligned, theoretically with Riley on a lot of this. I am. I felt like he was speaking my language, which made me feel really old during that press conference, right? Like you and I both did, whereas Alex's reaction was totally the opposite, which again, I think is the age gap here. I felt, I'm like, oh my God, I'm Pat's age now. Like, I feel like Pat feels. Like, why isn't the league like it used to be? Why aren't guys playing more often? Why is it all about, running off to some other trader or this? I totally with him on that. I'm also trying to present this practically. Jimmy Butler is not your average guy. and I'm not talking about as a basketball player. Like, he does his own thing. He is a contrarian. This idea, again, the only thing that's consistent here with other players is he wants his money. Like, but the idea of like he wouldn't do this or he wouldn't opt out and bolt after that, I think you're playing a bit of a dangerous game there. Now, again, they got to make a decision on whether or not it's worth it. But I'm trying to predict what I think may happen, not necessarily what I think should happen in this case.
You think it'll be worth it?
I mean, it's one more year at $58 million, right? I mean, that's really what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not chump change. It also prevents you from doing some other things if you're trying to stay under the second apron. I wouldn't anticipate that Jimmy would play more than 50 games in that season. I don't know at what level he'll play. If he plays even at the level he played this year, he would be bucking the trend of 99% of NBA stars. I mean, most guys are retired by then. I mean, they're not a whole. I mean, I think the LeBron thing has skewed everybody's sensibilities on this because he's just, he's just a cyborg. But like, I think that they would get $58 million worth of performance in that year? No. I mean, I think we're kidding ourselves to say they would. Like, I don't know. I don't even know how you would get close to it. But I also know that there are optics things here. There's the issue of Dwayne, the way Dwayne left, the way Chris wasn't happy, although it wasn't the Heat's fault on that. They made the right decision in terms of his health and trying to keep him off the court to protect himself. LeBron obviously didn't leave happy. I mean, there's a long list. Shaq didn't leave happy. I mean, this is what happens. With most guys, it's not just the Heat. With most guys, this is how it plays out.
True.
But I guess the question is this, Greg. Let's say that they do give him the extension this summer after everything that Pat just said, right? Don't they need to at least make it seem like they got a pound of flesh here one way or the other?
Yeah.
So how do they do that?
That's the $1 million question, the $58 million question. I don't know how you really, what was the phrase you used just now?
Pound of flesh.
What, and break
I'm
that
saying,
down.
What kind of concession do you get? Like, you don't. But that's the thing, right? So like, fans are going to be like, okay, so we made this whole big deal about the 2-year extension. They just ended up giving it to him anyway. I mean, I don't think. I don't, and again, it's really 1 year. Again, 1 year plus $3 million. But I'm just saying, like, I don't think there'll be incentive. Like we talked about, I don't think there'll be incentives in the contract. I don't think Jimmy's going to come to camp and say, "Damn it, I'm playing 75 games. I'm going to play them all hard." I mean, I asked him the question. I'm sure they saw this. I asked him the question at FAU last year at training camp. I said, "Do you have an expectation for how many games you're going to play?" And he looked me dead in the eye, laughed, and said, "Yeah, maybe 10." I mean, what do you think he's going to say? He's going to come in and say, "Okay, that's it. You know, Pat was right. I need to play more games. I need to play 40 minutes a night like I used to for Tibbs." Like, come on, you're not going to do it. So I'm just saying, from a public relations standpoint, how do they even? Once you go out on a limb like that, how do you just give him the extension and just walk all that back? I don't. That's the part I'm trying to process here.
And that's why I think I don't think it's a slam dunk that they just hand him the extension this summer. That's why I think if you're under the impression that Jimmy would walk if he doesn't get the extension this summer, I think that we should be on high alert, because I don't know that they're going to give out the extension this summer. That's kind of where I stand. And so, because of the way that they approached the presser, and when I say they, that's because it's one voice. So they,
right.
But the way
Except when you detox, right? Then it's
exactly, yeah, which was a really funny moment, by the way. It's good that you get those rising responses out of Riles after all these years. And now I forgot where the hell I was going.
I did it to you again. Okay, what you're saying is that you were basically going that you're headed for conflict here. Isn't that kind of where you're going? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seemed like you were heading in this direction where you can't really walk it back after everything that you just
said, right? Except for to just pay him, and then you kind of swallow your pride and you hope that he plays so good that fans forget about it, or that fans just don't really care and they're just happy to have their guy. I think there is something to seeing Dwayne in that other uniform that has fractured people to a degree and they don't want to see Jimmy in another uniform, but it is a different scenario. So I don't know that I have the same amount of compassion as I do in retrospect, and maybe I'll feel like I had an error in my ways along here, but I don't feel the same way in this Jimmy circumstance as I did in retrospect about Dwayne at that time.
I don't think most fans will, only because even though Jimmy delivered these incredible moments, there's only one Dwayne for them, because Dwayne was theirs, right? The idea of Dwayne playing for somebody else was gross, honestly. Like, it's just not something you even want to think about, particularly when everybody knew he really didn't want to play in Chicago for a variety of personal and other reasons, and ended up going there because he felt insulted. With Jimmy, it would just be like another team that he played for. I mean, I think it's more, to me, it'd be more like the LeBron thing, honestly. Like, but although I do think that fans are, the hardcore Heat fan, I think, is more attached to Jimmy than they were to Bron.
Yeah.
But you're right. But I don't. I still think it would be hard. But I don't think, like, let's say he ends up in Atlanta, something like that. Like, I don't think Heat fans are gonna. It's not gonna be like it was with Dwayne leaving.
What about Philadelphia?
Well, he was there before. I mean, if they're winning, if he wins a title somewhere else, and you're like, that was supposed to be our ring, and then we know what a lot of the fans in the Heat Twitter space, well, if you'd only gotten in more help, and again, that's the last part of this, which is that if you're committing to Jimmy long term, you are essentially, creating a possibility of getting less help. I mean, that's just the way it is. Like, if the contract continues to escalate, unless your cap and second apron numbers, I'm not saying tax, because they've shown willing to pay the tax now, but the second apron number continues to go up correspondingly to what Jimmy's salary is, you're essentially cutting what you can pay others, which makes it harder, because those guys, most of the guys you're going to bring in, if you're going to bring in a top level guy, are not going to take less than the max either. And we really entered a stage where you can't really have three max guys. So if you're going to have Jimmy and you're going to extend Bam, then really what we're talking about is refreshing the roster. Like, your third highest paid player probably needs to be a mid-level. And that's not Tyler right now. And that means that you're going to have to find a way to get value for Tyler. And we'll do a lot of episodes about this, but like, you're going to have to find a way to get value for Tyler and get mid-level type guys. And then you're going to have to hit on some minimums and some other role players in the way that teams like, say, Minnesota have. And they're starting to get expensive now too. So I just think, like, we are in a spot right now, and we'll close it here, and we're going to get to other non-Jimmy episodes as we go forward. We probably will do a hero episode tomorrow, where I do think, Greg, there is a real red alert possibility here of a real sort of Cold War, honestly. Even though the parties, I think, respect each other more, this is not a clutch situation with Miami. But again, the longer that this goes without an extension, we're going to get up until July 7th. And then it's going to be like, is he getting it or isn't he getting it? And it's going to be like a daily watch on that. And if he ends, like I said, I believe he will be at training camp. I believe he will play basketball, but we're going to spend the whole year wondering if he's opting out. I mean, that's where it's going to be. So, and
that's my anniversary, July 7th. So I won't have my attention redirected anywhere, right?
Well, we can celebrate it here on the podcast. All right. So anyway, that's where we're at today. Again, this was more of an episode of where we think it might go, not necessarily where we think it should go. We'll have plenty of time to get to that as this goes forward, because I don't think this story is going away anytime soon. All right. Again, check out Playback with us. We actually did some Panthers stuff on there as well. So if you're Panthers fans, make sure you check that out. We debuted that playback.tv/5RSN. Thanks to our sponsors, Big Brother, Ironwork.com, and also our friends are at c-armandstaffing.com. Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. After all, someone needs to listen to my dad.